Our subject tonight is something we would have known if we lived out in nature rather than protected from nature by man-made civilization. Something that we all return back to constantly all the time to get away from the pressures of man-made civilization. We go out into nature and simply surround ourselves with the 5 elements of nature and the natural things that grow there. So within the material world, what ancients have known for thousands and thousands of years, simply by looking around them, is that there are 5 great energies that make up everything that we're surrounded by. It is a simple truth that is the most empowering. Complex truths, the problem with technology these days is that it's made up of a series of very complex truths that require expensive equipment and eventually disempower the individual and empower those only who have very powerful equipment and a lot of money and a lot of resources. And suddenly we find ourselves having things administered to us that we don't understand, and we don't know how to interact with nature. This is actually a disempowerment, which is why an understanding of how matter is working is actually one of the first steps in our spiritual growth and our spiritual understanding, because it allows us to see the organizational structure of matter all around us. So the 5 elements, earth, water, fire, air, and space, are supposed to be the first meditation we have as children. We should have been initiated into their meaning, into their qualities. We should have been taken around by our elders and shown the meaning of these elements, and then draw to our attention how they're combining together to do everything in nature. How the sunshine picks the water up, lifts it up into the sky, makes it into clouds. The clouds go up over the mountains. It falls there, it freezes, and then melts slowly and becomes rivers and flows back down again. This interaction between these 5 elements is everything that's happening around us. In the context of space, on the platform of Earth, the swirling around of water and fire and air is everything. It's everything that's going on. And when we realize that everything is made of those 5 elements, if we then can track them, meaning if we can see them in their smallest particles, see the evidence of their presence, then we can see the combinations of them and see everything in nature as simply made up of combinations of these 5 things. The simplicity of this 5-element science is so profound because it's a way of looking at life. Actually, what's so liberating is that if you look at life in a complicated way, everything that's useful for you to know becomes obscured. And if you look at life in a simple way, you can see right to the truth that needs to be seen, and you can understand how to implement that. Now, the most glaring example of this is that our bodies are made of those 5 elements, and our food is made of those 5 elements. So, what we should have been taught from the very beginning of our life is how much of those elements are in our body, which in Ayurveda is called our body type. The type of body we have because of the inherent combination of these elements that resides in us. And then we should know that everything that exists in nature is some combination of them, and that therefore eating is first understanding the coordinates of what you're putting the food into, and second, understanding the coordinates of the food itself and exactly what it's composed of, and third, understanding the season and the seasonal effects, because through those 3 things we can absolutely understand the right food to put in our body at any given time. And this is the most important piece of information we could have to live in balance on the earth And without it, we have not got a clue, in spite of modern science, how to live in harmony on Earth. And therefore, with the proliferation of more and more and more kinds of artificial foods, and the manufacturing of food for us, and with all of the natural foods that we have, we go to the market and we still eat based on some blind emotional attitude that's driving us, that has nothing to do with whether that food is good for or beneficial to us at all. This abysmal, amazing, incredible ignorance that we live our whole lives and we don't even know how to eat. And we go to doctors and they don't even know how to describe the exact coordinates and nature of our body. So this science is the basis of living life on Earth, not even in a sacred way, in a successful way, of living successfully on Earth. And so the first thing to know then is that these 5 elements, when making organic bodies, combine together into 3 groupings. Those 3 groupings are called dosha, D-O-S-H-A, a Sanskrit word which means an imperfect thing, or an uneasy alliance between 2 things that are not the same. And a dosha then is 2 of those 5 energies combined together to make a substance, but the substance is only temporarily connected, and therefore it's unstable. And those 3 substances are air and space, which have a kinship with one another due to their subtle nature, and they make something called Vata, an unstable alliance between space and air. And then water and fire make an unstable alliance that's very hot and intense and burning, and it's called Pitta. And then water and earth make an unstable, gooey, sticky alliance, a kind of clay of which our bodies are made, which is called Kapha. These 3 doshas, Kapha dosha, Pitta dosha, and Vata dosha, are from 3 Sanskrit words, Ka, Pa, Kapha. Ka means water. So Kapha dosha is the water dosha. Pitta dosha is from tap. Tap is the root of tapasya, and tapasya means austerity. You'll notice that whenever you do anything very intensely, it generates heat. It's like rubbing 2 sticks together. It makes a friction. If you just try to sit in one position for a long period of time, you'll get heated up. If you work hard to do something, you'll generate heat. So tapasya, the austerity of doing something in a very focused way, generates heat by friction, and that heat is called pitta. And then vata is va, and va is where the root word of vehicle comes from. It means to move, or that which you get in and move, or that by which you move. So vata is the basis of vehicle, which they call in Sanskrit vahana. But it actually means that which is moving. So I'd like you to think that in nature there are actually 3 things, 3 departments. There's the moving department, the moving and communicating department. There's the cooking and transforming department, pitta. And then there's the sticky department, the gooey sticky department, which is kapha. Those 3 departments are the 3 doshas. In our body, then, we have a nervous system, and things are moving and must move. So all of that movement and all of that communication is conducted by Vata dosha. And we have a fire burning inside of us, and that fire is transforming everything that we put in. That is the fire burning in our mind as we digest ideas, It burns in our stomach as we digest food. It heats and burns all of the things that come into our system, separating the things that are useful and not useful, and sends away the waste products and keeps the things that are useful, transforms them again into the necessary ingredients and integrates them into the body. And then Kapha is the liquid and solid substance itself, the actual tangible body. And so the Pitta is the fire in your belly and the fire in your mind. And the Vata is the receptivity and the sensibility and the movement and represents the subtlety of air. Pitta represents the subtlety and burning quality and the intensity of fire. And Kapha represents the thing itself coming into manifestation. So it becomes the actual substance. In 1930, a psychologist named William Sheldon, by studying the Greek theory of the four humors, which were based on Ayurveda, came up with the idea that there were three kinds of people. Ectomorphs, morph means body, mesomorphs, and endomorphs. His theory was that one kind of body was connected to the ectoderm, the skin. One was connected to the mesoderm, the muscles. And one was connected to the endoderm, the gut and the lymph. And he developed this theory of psychology, and it became quite popular for a while, and then was superseded by other things because Ayurveda wasn't ready to come out into the world. So nobody knew what to do with this. They could see that there were different types. They could see that there was so now we think, if this is true, if every body has these three centers, it has a communication center and a movement center, it has its Vata center, it has a Pitta center where it's heating up and transforming and burning everything, and it has a Kapha center where it's making the substance and the liquid that hold the whole body together and give it its shape and form. If you have those three departments and everyone has those three departments, it could then be that you also embody one of those functions and are the living embodiment of that function. And that's how it's described in Ayurveda. That actually, the way bodies form is they form with the predominance of one of these three doshas. And that predominance then creates a particular kind of body functioning, which is always going on. And that body functioning, that's just as these three functions are always going on in our bodies. So one of them predominates and we become the embodiment of that in nature. Now, the way the yogis describe this is our physical body is a vehicle, and we're the consciousness that's inside. The most important thing to think of is that you don't arise from the container. The consciousness is in the vehicle. You're not the same as the vehicle. The vehicle is simply the automobile in which you're traveling. And if that's the case, then the consciousness itself is who you really are. That's why the basis of meditation is learning to separate consciousness from its vehicle. The simplest meditation that you can do is to sit down and separate yourself from the matter that makes up this vehicle. And if you ever get confused, that's the first step. Sit down and be the consciousness and pull yourself back from being the vehicle, just as if you'd gotten in your car and gotten amnesia and couldn't get out of your car. And someone had to come out and tell you, okay, now carefully remove your hands from the wheel. Now pull your feet back from the pedals. I mean, it feels like this if you've ever driven for 12 hours. You become one with the car and you're not sure you can even get out. So the problem with us, according to the yogis, is we've literally become one with the matter that is our vehicle, but that's not who we really are. We're really the consciousness. And it's really awkward for us to get stuck to the matter because the matter is not us. And when it wears out, being stuck to it is not useful. It's like being stuck to a dead body or stuck to clothing that no longer serves you. It's like if you had clothing on and you'd been wearing it for 30 years and people said to you, why don't you take it off? And you said, I don't know, I just don't know how. I'm stuck with it. Not so good. A much more sophisticated attitude, which is why this is a sophisticated attitude. It's not that we're angry at matter or don't like matter or want to separate from matter because of this. It's simply the realization that we're not matter, that we are in fact the consciousness. We're souls having a human experience. We're not humans having a spiritual experience. We're souls visiting the material world. And we made a vehicle and we're in the vehicle and we're driving around. But if we identify with the vehicle, all of life becomes extremely complicated and we become very bewildered by that. Just as surely as you would be bewildered by being identified with your car. And the psychologists are trying to convince you, please come out, come out. No, I can't let go. So this understanding then allows us to do a very interesting thing. You see, you'll hear people say all the time, I want to get rid of my ego or kill my ego, but they don't have a methodology. But actually, the ego is nothing more than the combined configuration of the body, of the 5-element combination. In other words, the 5 elements are combined together in a certain way, and that has a signature. A good way to think of this is that in everyone's body there's a monogramming department. And the food that we eat comes in, and it has somebody else's initials on it. It was an apple or an orange, or it was cheese, or it was milk. So all the food that you just ate had the signature of the plant that grew it. And that's the signature that was on the cell. And that's how it was identified. And now in your stomach, all of that is being just made into a mush. And that mush has nobody's name on it. It's just the general mush that results from digestion. And then your own body makes it into cells, and the monogramming department writes your gene code on each one. And in your gene code is your body type, which means that then your body type and its special characteristics are being written on each one of those cells. And ego is nothing more than that. It's just the identity of your particular vehicle. It's the make and model. That's all. But when you understand that, then you become as clear-headed about it as you are about your vehicle. If I said you have to sell your car and get another one, you went, oh no, oh, I'm so afraid. I'd say it's really not so bad. Come with me. We'll just we'll sell one and change the title and go get another one. It's okay. But this is called death. And our whole world is terrorized by this changing vehicles. And it ruins life. It really makes driving very painful. But the yogis say it doesn't have to be that way. It's really not that complicated. Just look, your vehicle's made of 5 elements. Watch them come in. It's just particles of food and particles of air and particles of earth and particles of water. And they're all glomming together, and then some part of us manufactures the vehicle and rebuilds the doors and the wires and the walls and the pipes and all the things that make it work. And consciousness is so busy in doing that consciousness has gotten lost in that. And the first and last lesson of yoga, until it's completely clearly understood, is that I'm the consciousness. You're the consciousness. You're the driver. Become the driver again, and you will be free. And if you just do that, you will see that all the other souls, all the other consciousness is lost. And where are they lost? They have misidentified their self with the 5 elements. So the first big accomplishment that comes from this is not medical, and it's not about what we eat, and it's not about healing in any medicinal sense of the word. It's about knowing who we really are. And so if you get confused, you just sit down and go, am I the earth? No, I'm not the earth. Am I the water? No, I'm not the water either. Am I the fire? No, I'm not the burning part. That's not me. Am I the air? No, I'm not the air either. Am I the space? No, I'm not. I'm none of those. Oh, okay. So it's almost like you've gotten all this stuff all over you, and you're just kind of flicking it off. And so the term in Sanskrit is neti neti. I'm not this, and I'm not that, and I'm not this, and I'm not that. I'm not the water, and I'm not the earth. In Tantra, it's called Bhuta Shuddhi. It means purifying the 5 elements by withdrawing your identification with them, by pulling back from being them. Instead of being them, you observe them and work cooperatively with them in the same way that you work with your vehicle cooperatively. The more professional you become, and the easier it is for you to get in and out and use it and drive and go where you want. So this first accomplishment of the body types is very important because most of our human relations are conflicted because of unnecessary amounts of ego being projected into every situation in which we're acting. And, in other words, we've misidentified with our body, and that confusion is causing conflict everywhere. The number one confusion it causes is that everyone's trying to have the same kind of body. Now this is because everyone is the consciousness, and so the consciousness has this idea of how I'm supposed to be. It misidentifies with the vehicle, and then it tries to make the vehicle be the self, and then when it doesn't work, then we get mad at the self, and then we don't like the self. We don't like ourself because we don't like our vehicle, and we don't understand that everyone is going to have a different kind of vehicle according to their function. Look at all the different animals. So here's a simple way to think of this. The Vata animals are fast-moving. They have a very highly refined nervous system. If you shoot a gun, they jump or fly or run away or move fast. They feel what's going on very easily and quickly. Why? Because the essence of their nature is to respond quickly and sensitively to what's going on around them. Why? Because they're more like air. They're more responsive. As the air moves, look how easily it moves. So because the air moves easily, if you have a preponderance of Vata, then you're just always responding and feeling and sensing all the things that are going on. And there's an exchange that's taking place, and you're aware of that exchange. And that subtlety, so think of it as subtle, the way air is subtle. And nature will educate you what it means to be Vata. Everything from the most subtle and most refined to the most fragmented and nervous. To be a Vata is a little bit like be an antenna, and to be receiving information all the time from everything, and lots of information. And so the Vata is tuned in and picking things up and noticing things and smelling things and sensing things and feeling them. And air is cold, so if you have cold hands and feet, that's a clear sign of Vata. Vata also, because of its sensitivity, the sleep pattern can be disturbed. And because Vata is also sensitive, it can be very rapid and very quick and very fast in its motions. And it can also be irregular. So the irregularity is another symptom of Vata. To be very big or very small, like a giant or midget, or someone who's extreme or extremes, or to have irregularities in your skeletal structure. So to be irregular or highly refined, or very fine, so fine bones, like a bird, are Vata. Ballerinas, with those fine movements of their body, are Vata. Their body, like the gazelle, so if you shoot a gun off, the gazelle jumps. That's its natural response. That's the vehicle's response. The consciousness is dragged along by the vehicle's response, because the two are together. And then the Pitta is more like the tiger's response. You shoot the gun, the tiger turns around and says, "Are you food?" Pitta thinks, "I'm going to eat you. I'm going to transform the situation." Pitta always feels like you're triangulated and you're in the gun sight. It's like this. It's direct and intense. Look at how a fire eats things. It's not very polite. It just goes, just eats them. That's Pitta. When you see Pitta, Pitta doesn't ask permission. Pitta's right. The tiger doesn't go, growl. Roar. Tiger goes, and everyone goes, whoa, okay. So you're serious about this, aren't you? You are going to eat someone today. So it's acid, it's burning, it's intense. And those who are Pitta go through their life eating and burning and intense. So if your hunger is intense and you must eat breakfast or you start eating yourself, then that's the characteristic that the fire is burning very strongly in you. That's your friend, Agni, ignition, fire down there burning. Whereas if you eat breakfast or food irregularly, if you kind of graze and browse and nibble here and nibble there and change your mind and go eat over here and then go eat over this way and don't do it regularly at all, that's Vata. Vata's problem is they're dissipating energy, so they have trouble holding on to energy. So they forget where things are sometimes. And they get scattered. Their energy gets scattered out into several different projects, and they have trouble withdrawing it, so they're kind of in multitaskers. So on a good day, they're very good multitaskers. But on a bad day, nothing got finished that day, because they're all partially finished. And the energy's scattered. And my favorite was, I do these kind of talks, and the person who says, what if you can't make up your mind which one of the three you are? That would be Vata. Vata is not always disturbed. Refined Vata is the elegance. It's that graceful person who walks in the room and all eyes turn and just watch. Or it's the dancer who can just move in a way that you just can't imagine that such precision is possible. And it's the refinement in anything that makes it just so perfect. It's the perfection of it. But you can see that if you were sharpening a knife and then you sharpened it just a little too far, it would get ragged. It would get brittle. So Vata's danger is it gets so refined that it then becomes hypersensitive. And so Vatas have to be careful to get enough sleep because they're dissipating energy. They have to be careful to get enough Kapha, or else the Kapha doesn't coat the wires in their body, and the wires start to short out, and they short out. So when a Vata is having a meltdown, it's kind of zzz, 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 zzz. And they look like they've been plugged into the mains, and which is probably because they've been around a Pitta too long. There's the mains they've been plugged into, which is a boss who's been going like this for 8 hours, and the Vata just goes home.
Sounds like my department.
Yeah. So then what the Vata needs in that moment is some Kapha, so we haven't talked about Kapha. But Kapha is the thing which encompasses, encloses, it's the gut, it's the lymph. So if Pitta is the digestion, and Vata is the nervous system and the communication and the movement of things, then Kapha is all the nurturance, it's all the love. It's what holds things together. It's their stability. And it's a combination of their feeling, which is the water element, and their channel, which is the earth element. So if the Kapha is more made of earth, they're a little bit more matter of fact, but they're still nurturing. You know that kind of tugboat Annie, the real, looks tough on the outside, but sweet and soft on the inside. It's the slightly overweight person in the office that takes care of everything and holds everything together and has been at their desk at 8 o'clock in the morning every morning for the last 25 years. And gets the plaque that says, best employee. We would all die without you. And the Pitta comes in and goes, "Rah!" And the Kapha goes, have you had breakfast? They really don't care. They just go, that's nice. So without the Kaphas, the world would end. There would be no love. There would be no lunch. There would be things would not be held together. There would be no structure. And in us, without our Kapha, we would simply evaporate. And Kaphas tend to skip breakfast because their metabolism is slower. So you just think in terms of metabolism. The Vata's metabolism is, the problem there is there's neither enough substance nor enough fire in the extreme. And if you were pure Vata, You would have trouble because you wouldn't have fluid for lubricating your joints. You wouldn't have enough substance, so you'd keep losing weight rather than gaining it. So on a bad day, at its extreme, Vata, that would be so stripped of its other resources and so cold that it would sort of keep shutting down, and it would need those other two. And you can see it right away that what we're going to learn here is our mix, and then we're going to learn what to feed ourselves. When do I need to stoke the fires? When do I need more lubrication? When do I need more refinement and subtlety and communication? And we're then also going to learn to appreciate all of these body types in everyone around us. And instead of striving to be what we're not, we're going to be the body type that we are to perfection. And there's an unbalanced and balanced version of each body type. So Kapha then tends to be a deep sleeper. So if you sleep deeply, that's a Kapha characteristic. If you have trouble sleeping, that's a Vata characteristic. If you hit the pillow and down for the count, hurricane, you go, what? That's a Kapha characteristic. Deep sleep, smooth, hair is oily. Vata's hair is dry because they don't have enough lubrication. So their body and parts of their body become dried out. Whereas Kaphas are oily or lubricated, they have more stamina. Kaphas have more endurance because the Kapha in them gives them more endurance. On a bad day, Kaphas become lethargic because they don't have enough fire to deal with the amount of matter that they've attracted, and they don't have enough movement. So if Kaphas don't move, they get into trouble because they have too much substance and the ability to attract it. And also, since their metabolism is not as intense, if they eat late at night, they can't metabolize it, so they store it. So the simple secret for Vatas is they have trouble storing. Kaphas are programmed to store, and they're programmed to hold. So they're the ones that are holding everything together. That's their job. So they have to know what to eat and when to eat it so that they don't get on the wrong side of that, and then their body gets into a storage program where it starts storing too much. Whereas Pittas are the ones that blow a valve. So Pitta has to be careful because they think they can do anything, and they do for a while, but then when they get to a certain age, they just simply blow one of the pipes and they're done. So they're the one with the red face that's 50 years old, and you start to think, like any minute this could explode. And it will if they haven't got enough Kapha and if they don't become more refined. So remember, Vata is refinement and Kapha is nurturance. And Pitta, when it's not being too intense, is clarity. So when your Pitta is working perfectly, you take what you need out of the food and you leave behind the rest. So that clarity in Pitta is its best, the refinement in Vata is its best, and the nurturance and love and holding everything together of Kapha is its best. Then each one of us has a primary, and as you hear me talking and saying this, you should be thinking, which one of these have I been in my life? Have I been the aggressor? Have I been the sensitive one? Have I been the one that held things together? What role have I played? Now, you'll probably have one that's dominant and one that's secondary and one that's less. Most people then are either, they have a dominant and a secondary, so they'll be Vata. Very few people are purely Vata, but you can recognize them because they're the ectomorphs. They're very skinny. They can't gain weight. They're high-strung. They talk fast. They're light sleepers. All the characteristics will be there, cold hands and feet. If you're mixed, if you're thinking, I'm mixed, then you need to find what's your dominant. What's the lead one? And your dominant then is going to be the one you know you've been the most. And then your secondary will be fairly obvious because there'll be one that you have the least of. For example, if you're always hot and always warm, but you're also very nurturing and caring, then we know you're going to be a mixture of Pitta and Kapha. Now the question is, how much weight gain do you have? Can you gain 40 pounds? In that case, you're Kapha Pitta. Can you only gain 20? Do you have a very high metabolism and you just keep using up your food? In that case, you're Pitta Kapha. So there'll be Vata, Vata Pitta, Vata Kapha. Pitta, Pitta Kapha, Pitta Vata, Kapha, Kapha Vata, Kapha Pitta, and then tridoshic, or all three, combined together. The combination of all three together is very rare. Now, you could express this as 4, 3, 2, or 4, 2, 2, or 3, 3, 2, meaning you could assign a number and say, well, I have this much Pitta, and this much Kapha, and this much Vata. I'm Pitta dominant with about the same amount of Vata as Kapha. It could be that way as well. After a while, once you recognize your primary body type, that primary body type is a lifelong reality. That will be with you for your whole life. But by the way you live, by what you eat, and by how you act within nature, you'll change your body type. You modify it every time you put something in it. Every time you go outside in nature, the climate changes your body type. So if it's dry and you're dry, then you're just matching how many dries and how many wets and how many hots are we getting. Here in Vancouver, since it's always wet, it's more Kapha, isn't it? Hasn't it been a Kapha year? Hasn't the rain been there a lot this year? So if you're Kapha, then you're more likely to be affected by that. If you're Vata, you'll also be affected by it because you'll be cold too much, because you won't get warm. Whereas if you're Pitta, you'll have the most resistance to it. But if you put a Pitta in somewhere like Phoenix, Arizona, then it's like having a really hot sports car that just overheats easily, and it's 110 all the time. So just being there, you're at risk, and you can boil over. Whereas Vatas love Phoenix because their hands and feet are not cold anymore, except when they go into the air conditioning. Yeah, and that's what you get in Phoenix. That's really strange. Talk about disturbed body types. You get 110 outside and 55 inside in air conditioning. You have to bring a snowsuit to go to the mall. Very strange. So when you understand this, then you understand that food is the next way in which we absorb these all the time and from each other. Now, one place this is going to lead us then is to the psychology of your body type, meaning everyone's psyche is going to be conditioned by their vehicle. And so they're going to behave in certain ways, quite predictable ways, based on the vehicle, just as your vehicle would behave in certain ways out on the road. Then the next thing is it's going to behave in certain climates a certain predictable way. So this should help you decide where to live. And then the foods that you eat are all made up of these 5 elements. And in foods, there are 6 flavors: sweet, astringent, and bitter, which are the 3 cooling flavors: sweet, astringent, and bitter, and sour, salty, and pungent, which are the 3 fiery or heating flavors. Those 6 flavors live in a certain place on your tongue. They're each mapped on the tongue. The bitter place is here, and the sweet place is here, and the sour place is here. And those 6 are made up of the 5 elements in different combinations. So this means that every food, every spice, everything you could put in your body is made up of these 5 elements, and eating is actually changing the climate inside your body. And climate is changing the climate inside your body. And then everything that you do and whoever you associate with is changing your dosha again. Once you understand this, then you begin to live your life scientifically, watching to see what the symptoms are, watching your vehicle to see whether it's getting cold or whether it's getting warm, which part is cold and warm, where it's overheating, where it's burning, where it's not lubricated properly. So as you extend this vision, there are 5 places in the body that are Vata, there are 5 places that are Kapha, there are 5 places that are Pitta. And once you know the table of the foods and the table of the flavors and how to balance, then a cooling flavor will balance a Pitta. And cooling flavors for Vatas are dangerous because they're already cold. So they want something warm, so they need ginger tea. So they need to import these things. Now, this is the entire basis of preventive medicine is these body types. When you know your body type, you know what to do under different circumstances. And as soon as you start to feel an imbalance, then you know what to do to change the imbalance. But if not, then you're going to relate to food emotionally. And you're going to relate to people by ego. And you're not going to see their vehicle. You're still going to see that as intentional behavior from them. But it's not intentional behavior, any more than the tiger is intentionally growling when you come near them, or the deer intentionally runs away, or the kapha, which would be the elephant, and you shoot the gun and the elephant grabs some dirt and goes, whatever. Because the elephant's feeling pretty confident. I mean, it's the biggest animal out there, so it has this sense that my kapha is fine. How are you? I'm okay. So kapha feels okay. Kapha's fine. So kapha holds things together. Kapha gives hugs. Kapha is the embrace that makes you feel calm. And the kaphas are calm. And they can do a lot because they've got this extra resource of energy. If they get too calm, they become stagnant. And if they get too stagnant, they become a couch potato and they don't move. And nothing in them moves. So they lack the movement of Vata and they lack the digestion of Pitta. So you put two kaphas together, in the extreme, and they'll say, what do you want to do? And they'll say, I don't know, what do you want to do? I don't know, what do you want to do? And you put two pittas together too much, and it's the War of the Roses. They're going like this. No, my way. No, I'm right. No, I'm right. No. I said this way. No, I said this way. And then two vatas together, and they're...
Run.
We make fun of them just so you can see it, but in actual fact, in their balanced form, if you put two refined vatas together, they may be just too much for each other. In other words, too much of a good thing is not necessarily better. Therefore, there's a just right way to balance relationships by understanding these doshas, because if you understand that, then you can understand what would you like to bond with the other person and have different. For example, pittas usually require some pitta in the other person, or they're just too much. So it's probable that a pitta needs some pitta in the other person and then something to learn from. So probably if someone's pitta kapha, it's good for them to be with kapha pitta. It's not so good for them to be with the pure vata because they would just start to hammer them after a while. They would just go, you're just too sensitive, And then if they were with pure kapha, then the kapha is just not going to be up for the game. They're just too lethargic. Whereas a kapha pitta, then they have reserves of pitta to call upon inside of them. So once you understand what kind of animal you are, self-knowledge is so profound. It's the most powerful thing that you could have. Because with this knowledge, you'll actually know how to live on the planet in a sacred way, and you'll see everyone else in a sacred way. And all the unnecessary ego is removed from the way you observe everyone and everything in nature. And you can see it in animals. I used to do this with horses when I rode and trained horses. You could match riders to horses by understanding the body type of the horse. I mean, we would call it a hot horse. So you don't want to put a too calm rider on a really hot horse. So what we're saying is a too much kapha person on a really hot horse, they're going to get knocked off. A too much vata person is just going to go like, no, I can't. It's too much power. It's a great indicator. And a too much pitta person may be the right person for that horse, but then it can be dangerous too. So you probably want some kapha with that horse that's way too hot, because that's going to be the most important thing, is somebody who can calm them and keep them calm. So in every situation, there's going to be a medicine that's right for you that is actually a food or an herb or a person or a situation or a climate or an environment or a part of nature. But since nature is nothing but these five elements, once we clearly understand this, this is the secret of living cooperatively and harmoniously with nature in a sacred way, and of maintaining the vision that we as humans and our bodies are in nature, not separate from nature. And our biggest problem, the danger our planet faces right now, is we have separated from nature. We've divorced ourselves from nature. We no longer see ourselves as organically related to nature, and therefore we're an endangered species. Whereas, by thinking this way, we see all the animals and all the plants and everything that exists as integrated into this viewpoint, and then all the inorganic things are the raw energies of the 5 elements before they become the doshas. And with this in mind, we understand how to actually build and design a lifestyle. And you can imagine in a family, think of how terrible it is. You probably all experienced this. As you were growing up, everybody was forcing you to eat certain foods. You're at the dinner table and your parents are going, eat your food. I told you to eat your food. They're actually feeding you food that's poison to you. Because your dosha determines what and when you should eat and what kinds of foods. Many times children are just going, no, I really don't like that. I really don't want that. And they're smart enough at that point to still be reacting to their dosha. But at a certain point, that wisdom, that intelligence is going to be removed. And then they're just going to eat emotionally. And then they're just going to react emotionally. And then they're not going to know their body. And next, they're not going to like their body. And they're not going to be in communication with it. And this whole subject is so profound because it's eventually going to remove all the unnecessary ego to teach us how to see the advanced warning symptoms of imbalances. And so, according to Ayurveda, there are 7 stages of the development of a disease. And the 7th stage is irreversible symptoms. And we go to doctors in stage 6 and stage 5. So we go 5 stages too far along to do much about what's happened. But in actual fact, there were symptoms all before that of imbalances. And since these doshas live in different parts of the body, what happens is, if you get too much of one, it overflows from the place it's supposed to be and starts to be going to other places it's not supposed to be. It would be like if the water in your kitchen flowed into your living room, you'd think you had a problem. The living room's a Vata place. It's dry. It's supposed to be Kapha and Vata. It's supposed to be Vata and Pitta. It's not supposed to be Kapha. Kitchen's Kapha and Pitta. There's fire there and there's water there. If the fire starts to overflow from the stove, that's not good. It can't go to the ceilings and the walls. So the same thing happens inside of our body. These doshas jump outside their containers, outside the places they're supposed to be, and then they accumulate in places they're not supposed to be. Because we don't know to stop eating a certain food or stop living in a certain way. And so we keep taking too much of that. Because our ego says, if I'm pitta, it says eat more pitta things, hot spices, more, their intensity. Give me more intensity. And the vatas eat irregularly and do more irregular and erratic things, and they get more and more disturbed. And the kaphas eat more heavy food, skip breakfast, skip lunch, and then have a heavy dinner at 8 o'clock at night. And then they go to sleep, and then they store that food. So everybody, by ego, tends to agitate and accumulate the dosha that they already have too much of, because the ego feels good about that, but it creates exactly the opposite beneficial effect. It distorts the energy field. And then that excess flows out where it shouldn't be, and then that starts to subvert the system. So we're at stage 1, then stage 2, then stage 3, then stage 4. And by the time we get way along, we have what's called our Vikruti. Your body type is called your Prakruti, meaning your natural self. And your distorted self, Vikruti, happens farther down when you start violating the laws of what's good for you. So it's as if, and I'll end with this, each one of our vehicles comes with an owner's manual. And on the owner's manual, the first thing it says is, this is your dosha. You are a Pitta Kapha. You are a Vata Pitta. You are a Vata Kapha. This is your owner's manual. Read carefully the foods that will balance you, the foods that will unbalance you, the foods that will heal you, the foods that will hurt you, the climate that will heal you, the climate that will hurt you, the people you should live with, the people you can't live with. And without understanding this, people are all lovable and beautiful and wonderful. You can fall madly in love with somebody whose dosha will kill you. It's not personal at all. Not in the least. And many times, I once did a seminar like this to a corporate environment, and I was describing how one of the classic toxic relationships is a very Pitta man with a very Vata woman. Mm-hmm. Because the Vata woman likes the Pitta in the man, likes a warm man to crawl into bed with, and likes their intensity. And the Pitta man appreciates getting the refinement and the beauty and the elegance, and it's really great until 2 or 3 years in. And the man starts rubbing her raw, and he doesn't listen, and he's not sensitive, and she's hypersensitive, and so she starts complaining, and then he doesn't like complaints because he's Pitta, and pretty soon they're just killing each other. And there's no way out of it. That Pitta man is not meant, if he's mostly Pitta, he just cannot be with a Vata person as his permanent live-in person. He's got to have a Kapha who can buffer that energy of the Pitta. And I said this at the conference, and this guy stood up and he said, "You just described my last marriage and my current one." My last marriage was terrible and ended terribly, and we loved each other, but we hated each other by the time we were done, and it was all based on just what you said. And now I'm with somebody, and she's a Kapha, and we get along great, and I have a great lifestyle, and we love each other, and we do things together. And yes, because it's an energetic compatibility. So if you think of the Vata and the Pitta and the Kapha as the ectomorph and the endomorph and the mesomorph, as the slender person, the medium person, and the curvaceous person, those three types, and you recognize them everywhere, and recognize them as the result of these five energies of earth and water and fire and air and space. If you adopt this, the way I like to describe it is, if you've seen these pictures of people who put on ultraviolet goggles or infrared goggles, then they see everything in terms of temperature, or they see everything in terms of the light that it's giving off. So to really use this knowledge, you need to put it on like a pair of goggles and walk around all day looking at the elements and doshas that make up everyone and everything. If you do this, then all your relationships will change. And there's a saying that I made up related to this, that is, ego expands to fill the space not filled with knowledge. Our dilemma is that without a model like this, we're actually using ego and a less effective and less true model of what's going on all the time. And we're projecting that model onto others, but it's not true. And the dissonance that's caused by that is in our relationships, it's at work, it's in our diet, it's in how we exercise, it's in how we relate to nature, it's in clothes we wear, it's in the climate we live in, because we don't know how to live a sacred lifestyle on earth. But with the five elements and the three doshas and the knowledge that comes from that, we actually begin to cooperate as a real part of nature in everything that we do, with everyone that we relate with. And that natural viewpoint reduces our unnecessary ego to a minimum. We begin to see everything around us as natural, and we begin to know how to have what I like to call a user-friendly, point-and-click user interface to the material world. Thank you very much.